Okay, so there are a couple things that we need to consider when we're making a 3D print, and one of those is the width of the actual print. So it squeezes plastic through a nozzle, and that plastic can only be a certain thickness. So when we're looking at different lines, we need to make sure that those lines are at least 0.5 millimeters or wider. So we can check that and say dim, and that's going to be dimension, and we're going to check some dimension points. So I'm going to check across here, and that shows us 0.31, and that's in millimeters. So 0.31, that means it's not actually going to print. If I take this object and I export it, so I can look at my properties really quick. I'll look at units, make sure I'm in millimeters, that's good. And then I will say, I'm going to export this piece here. And then I can open it up. Okay, and it's going to show up in here, and we're going to see that the model shows up with that text on there. And so you'd say, okay, well, why is that a problem? The model shows up with text. But this is the solid view, so this is showing what our model actually looks like. We can go to our layer view and look what it'll actually print, and you see that there's nothing there. So the slicer knows that it can only, or the slicer, this is the software that we use, and we call it the slicer software. It knows that it can only print something that is a certain thickness, and that text is not thick enough to be printed. So we have to make sure that we can get it actually printed. So let's go into Rhino and fix that. So I'm going to do a couple of things here really quick, and I'll show you kind of the process by which I would go about changing this. So I'm going to explode this poly surface, and then I'm actually going to go to this level here, and everything that I select is something that's going to be chosen. So I actually select the background there. I don't want to do that. Maybe we'll try this. Great. So I can delete all that text. I'm also going to actually delete a surface here. So let me make sure that this surface is exploded properly. There we go. Okay. Great. So now I just have this open surface. I have this open poly surface, which will definitely not 3D print. There will just be a bunch of issues with it. So I'm going to push cap. Oh, actually, the first thing I need to do is I need to join it. So join. Now we have an open poly surface. So 5 surfaces or poly surfaces joined into one open poly surface. Great. I'm going to take this poly surface and I'm going to cap it. So that just puts a surface on the top there. And now I have a nice canvas that I can work with here. So I'm going to make sure that I go down here and I have center selected, and then I'm going to make my text. You'll see why I have center selected here in a second. So I believe this said, let me double check here. Okay, so I believe this said, something like this. So I know that this is a circle, and if I'm trying to write text across it, then I have a thin spot up here to write text, a thin spot down here, and a much wider spot in the middle. So I'm actually going to split this up. So I'm going to say made with love, and then Sashi on the bottom there. And you'll notice I have these 2 items here selected, so I have it centered in the middle, and then I also have the text in the middle, and that just means that the placement point, when it generates this text, is going to be right in the center of the text. If I had it at the top, then the placement point would be down here at the bottom, and if I had it at the bottom like this, then the placement point would be right here at the top, or the center point, I guess, of this text. So I'm going to say yes. 6 millimeters seems about good for me, so we're going to see if I bumped it up to like 7 millimeters, it might not fit on my canvas, so I'm going to go out to the edge here. You see that now I kind of have some edges running off here. Let's look at this perspective view a little bit better. So I have some edges running off, so I'm actually going to do Control Z, and then I'll push my space bar to redo that. And I'm going to go back down Let's try 6.5 and see what that does. So that just barely gets it in there. Pretty close on the edge. I might want to make it a little bit smaller, but I think we'll go ahead and go with this. So now I have these curves here. I'm going to select all of those curves. I'm going to extrude them. So extrude curve. And then I'm just going to kind of eyeball the distance here. If you wanted it a specific distance, you could just type it in. But I'm going to say about there. We're going to call that good. So a couple of things I need to do here. I'm going to select all of those, push cap. And then I'm also going to select everything here. And I'm actually going to do a Boolean union. Boolean union, made my meshes, great. So now this is all one single object, but you'll notice I have some holes here that need to be created because when it made it, it extruded all the curves, not just the outside curves. And so that means that I have some holes that I need to create. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of these. I'm going to push shift and select all of these little curves through here. This is why a ghosted view is kind of good. So I'm going to select all the curves. I'll push control to deselect that and then shift again to select the curve I need. Great. So I've got all those curves selected that I need. And now I'm going to use the command called make hole. Make hole. What hole do I want to make the cut in? Well, it's this big poly surface, and I've already joined it, so it makes it easy for me to cut it because it's considered a single surface. And I'm just going to pull them all the way out and click down on it. And now I have nice holes in there that actually form what the words are supposed to show. One last thing I need to do before I submit this for printing is make sure that I don't have any extraneous curves. So I'm going to say cell curve, and all that's going to do is select all of my just regular curves. I'll push delete, and now I have two poly surfaces added to the selection, and they're closed poly surfaces. And that's important. If you want to make sure that your poly surface is closed, you can also say show edges. And I can select both of these, and I'll push enter. And it'll show all the edges, but we want to look at specifically naked edges, meaning that they're not bonded to something, or non-manifold edges, meaning that they are like through other objects or something like that. And I can push zoom. It shows, it doesn't show anything. It would highlight them in this purplish color, but it looks good. So making sure that that's all good. I'm going to select both of these, file, export selected. I already checked if this was in millimeters earlier, so we should be good. I'm going to put this on the desktop, and I'm actually just going to rename it the same thing. It's going to ask me if I want to replace it, and I'm going to say yes. Great. So now we can go here. I'm going to delete this model. This is something that we'll do on our end, but now we can see that if I look in layer view, those are actually thick enough. And if you want to double check that they're thick enough, we can go into Rhino and again use our dimension property, so our dimension command. So dim, I'm going to look at dimension points, and I think this L here is probably the thinnest one that we've got, so I'm just going to take a guess on that. 0.8. So 0.8 is past our 0.5, that's good. That means it'll print. All right, thanks for watching.